All right, we're live. So this is another episode of the KEW Exchange. This is something that I'm starting new, which is the group episodes, because I think the engagement, the interaction, and the conversations are very important and they need to happen. So today we have Anna Maria Ignat Burgett. I pray that's right. We have, of course, Annie Lieb, of course, and we have Sam Swidzinski, which I'm going to try my best.
You did good.
So today we're going to talk about bipolar, what it is, and living with it. And I was diagnosed with type 2 bipolar, slightly, very slightly, which today is not managed by medication because they told me I didn't need it anymore. So I figured one less medication, so I haven't taken it. I still have my slight ups and downs. I still have my slight mania, but I've found ways to make it healthy for me rather than my escapisms that I used to use. So why don't we just go around the square, and Anna, why don't you start us out with an introduction to you, then we'll go to Sam, then Annie, and we'll go from there.
All right, so my bipolar has had an onset only like a year and a bit ago. It was at the end of 2019 in November, December. And my my diagnosis came exactly a year ago because I went to like 3 psychiatrists. I was like, no, it can't be that. No, let's try another one. Are you sure? So yeah, a bit of denial at first, but then yeah, I got confirmed by the 3rd one. So I'm like, yeah, this is it really. So yeah, then it started my journey of acceptance, and eventually I kind of used it to fuel my creativity and to go back to some things that I've been wanting to do when I was since I was young. So that's my story.
Thank you, Anna. So I only go to you since I just mixed the boxes around because I felt guilty of blocking Annie rather than me.
So you want me to go? Are you going Sam or me?
Let Sam go first, and then we'll just take the conversation.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Sam. I was diagnosed with bipolar now about 8 years ago, but I started to have sort of problems with the ups and downs in my mood about 12 years ago. I started to have, those sort of hypermanic highs, a bit less high, and then followed by lows, and it was sort of cycling. But then I had a sort of full-blown manic episode, which led to my diagnosis. But for quite a long time, to be honest, I wasn't really given the right treatment. I felt very like the NHS, the people that were around me weren't really supporting me in the way that I wanted to be supported, and felt like I needed to be supported. But fortunately, I met some research psychiatrists who sort of took me under their wing and really helped me access the right support. So I felt really, really fortunate to have that. And then they sort of helped me to get on the right medication, to know the right things to do. And I've been stable now in terms of my mood overall for about five years now.
It's amazing.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really pleased. And now I do work. I do research myself in bipolar now, and I've recently written a book about bipolar. And yeah, so I just really want to give back because I feel very fortunate to have had these really good experiences with some really great psychiatrists. And yeah, I just sort of want to be the same to some other people now. So that's just a bit about me.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you're stable. So this is a little vulnerable for me. It's not something that I go and talk about a ton. I'm not ashamed by any means. It's just not something that I've talked about a lot. But I was actually misdiagnosed throughout almost my whole life for about 25 years with anxiety and depression. So therefore, I wasn't really getting better. I was just like going like this, and no one caught it. Of course, I didn't know. There was even less information then than there is now, as I'm 42 now. And I was correctly diagnosed in 2014 when I was so bad that I went into a hospital because I couldn't take it anymore. And that was one of 2 hospitalizations. So it was finally caught, and I realized that not all of my life, but so much of my life and the trajectory and everything that I was doing and the ways I was acting, my behaviors and all of these decisions were definitely affected strongly by this manic depression. And so I was diagnosed with bipolar 2. I also want to add one other thing. Neither of you did this, which is amazing. I don't like when people say I am bipolar. It really bothers me. Or she's bipolar or he's bipolar. We are not defined by this. I am, we are just like everybody else. We just have some special gifts. So I'll get more into my story if you guys have questions or want to know more, but that's really what happened. So when I was about 35, I was finally correctly diagnosed and got to build my life back brick by brick. And here I am.
Okay, thank you.
So, Anna, why don't we start with your story first, because you're the most recent.
Yeah. So now that you, Annie and Sam, are mentioning, I want to share my story a bit before that as well, because like a few years before that, I think like after I had my first child, I went to my NHS doctor and I said, I think I have ADHD. And he said, no, you have generalized anxiety disorder. I'm like, fine. And he gave me some antidepressants or something. And eventually I got off of them. Let's move forward 2.5 years when I had the second child. And I went back and said, like, I'm not feeling well. I was diagnosed with postnatal depression. And eventually the therapist I was saying is like, actually, I think you have ADHD. I think you should see a psychiatrist and check it out. And I went like 2 years after, and definitely I had ADHD. The thing is that looking back to the discussion that I had with that particular psychiatrist, there were a lot of signs of this kind of mood. He was like, he really tried to assess whether it was bipolar or ADHD. But I think that the seriousness of the mood fluctuations was not as bad, right? However, I was put on stimulants, right? And obviously, I'm thinking back now, if I didn't have this kind of medication, it's possible that the full-blown bipolar 2 and the big manic episode I had never happened, right? So it's really important to have, like you guys said, the right diagnosis and the right specialist to see, because this is like, I think it's like Michael was saying, there's so many levels of how serious this is, and so many things that can add to it, right? Like lifestyle, if we take medications, if we're under a lot of stress, changes in life. So yeah.
So to just add on to what you're saying, I had a very similar story in that I have ADHD as well. Yeah. So all of these, I have a neuroscience background because I was in pharma for a while. So all of these, as you probably all know, but I don't know if the listeners or watchers know, that they're all so related and concomitant, and can really present, first of all, differently in everybody, but second of all, can present very similarly to one another. There's also other things like personality disorders like borderline and narcissistic personality. So all those things can be coupled with this. ADHD commonly can be coupled with any of these. But what they did wrong with me, which whatever, was they put me on an SSRI because they thought it was depression and anxiety. My mania actually presented as irritability. It didn't present having it weren't clear manic episodes. They were really small. But what the antidepressants did to me was they put me into serotonin syndrome. So I was overflowed. So it kept me in rapid cycles. So it looked a lot like, to give them a little credit, it did look like depression and anxiety a lot, because they were so rapid that no one could really catch it. I was just up and down and up. I wasn't like this. Yeah. But my behaviors, if I look back, with the drinking and the drugs and the partying and the, filling of my voids from every direction were that was my mania. So it was like, of course, hindsight's 20/20, right? So like you look back and you're like, God, I can't believe I didn't see this. But it's like, what did I know? What did my parents know? What did, so.
Yeah. I mean, like, from what you're saying, like two sort of things are coming to mind. Like, first off, what percentage, because like they recently did like a study at King's, what percentage do you all think there is comorbid bipolar with ADHD? Like what percentage of people with bipolar do you think have
I read
ADHD.
this research. I read this research recently. So actually, 70% of people with bipolar have comorbid ADHD, and 20% of people that get diagnosed with ADHD end up getting bipolar later on as well. So it's quite a big correlation, right?
I have a theory. Okay, I have a theory. I know I'm not a doctor, but my theory that I think is going to come out later in life, or maybe after this lifetime, is that there really is no plain old depression and anxiety. I think that there are parts of bipolar in everybody that has depression and anxiety. I just haven't done the research because I'm not a doctor. So I can't prove it, but my feeling is that these are so intertwined and so woven into one another that, like you said earlier, I forget who said it. I think one of you said, there's environment. There's so many other things. There maybe is ADHD. There might be a personality disorder. There's all these things. So like each person presents differently. So how could they possibly know? It's like a shot in the dark. Let me throw you on Prozac. Let me add a mood stable. It's like you're trying to get your cocktail from these doctors, your cocktail that works for you. When is it that, you get on Zoloft and you're fine? It's rare.
Sure.
Yeah. I think with medication, I think the biggest issue that both of you sort of mentioned about, going on stimulants or going on an antidepressant, really doctors should ask whether people have got, these types of mood imbalances where they're having these ups and downs, and get a history to find out, okay, are there ups and downs in mood? Is it possible that this person might have some sort of bipolar condition? Because if they do, then these medications can have really disastrous effects, like the effects that they said, for both of you. So I think that really, doctors, this is something I'm very passionate about, really need to improve in this area, and start to have more awareness, but also listen more, try and find out, okay, are these people possibly experiencing bipolar?
Here's the other part. Too many primary care physicians, general practitioners, are diagnosing this. This is a psychiatric neuroscience situation that needs to be diagnosed in a psych space. Primary care physicians, who, by the way, I called on when I was in pharma. So I know that they write them, a ton of them, SSRIs, mood stabilizers, all of it. They are not trained in this.
No. They just give you a form to fill, right?
It's the DSM questions, and we can all present differently. Not only that, we all think of ourselves differently. What they should really be doing is asking their best friend or their mother or someone that's around them all the time to be answering these questions, not themselves.
I totally agree with that, because actually the ADHD diagnosis was I had 3 sessions with a really good psychiatrist. The guy really gave me a really intense kind of historical background. But the thing is, when we answer this question, we are biased, right? And I think I kind of felt where he was going towards, but my mind felt no, that's impossible. It's not happening to me, right? And I had this, because I already, I told you, I went to the GP a few years back, and I kind of already had that in mind. Oh, I have ADHD, certainly. Right. So my answer, I admit my part of this, right? Because my answers, I think I was underplaying certain episodes that I had been through. And because for instance, my mania expresses itself getting super excited about a new project. So I go into research on a lot of things. I start creating new ideas and so on. So before I was diagnosed, I had months of going into nutrition. So I would read everything about nutrition. I had months about makeup. So I did makeup artist course, and I pay all these courses. I started reading out. Then I went into neuroscience. So I did all sorts of courses on Coursera and so on. That's how what my brain does at that moment. And also talking a lot and so on. It's a lot, but what happens now, and I wanted to share with everybody, with you guys, some people that are doing research, and some might know about it, they are starting to look into biomarkers to actually manage to diagnose this more correctly through tests. And I think in the following years, we will see for both depression and bipolar, we will see a more accuracy in diagnosis. And also they're using those markers to pinpoint the right medication for each particular patient. So that's something that really like makes me super hopeful that things will start to get better and you see less misdiagnosis.
So not to be negative, but some of those tests are not what we think. Some of those markers are how the person metabolizes a drug.
Yeah.
What the message to us and the community is, this is going to tell you what drug is going to help you.
No, that's the stuff that they already have now. And
Right.
So
you're saying coming, there's stuff coming.
Yeah, they did some research
nice.
some universities, and they're like, like the biomarkers for cancer and stuff like that. It's like DNA kind of, I don't know. So anyways, I just read research, so let's see.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. Like, I find it really interesting as well, and I think it's really cool how research is now developing a lot. And the thing with bipolar is obviously you've got different camps in terms of different people and how they think that bipolar should be treated. But the truth of the matter is that the way that it's treated for different people is different because the reasons why each person is experiencing these things is different. So, for example, some people are very much in the camp of you need to watch your diet, and then as if you watch your diet, then you don't need medication, you don't need anything, you do that. And then I get on Twitter arguments all the time, people just being like, that's the only way to do it. Because
sure.
And then you got other people around who are like, it's a thyroid problem, you sort out your thyroid and then everything's fine. And then you get other people that say everyone should be on antipsychotics or mood stabilizers. So you've got these different camps, but different people have got this for different reasons. It might be something similar, but of course, like bipolar, it's imbalances in neurotransmitters. Really, that's all that it is. But the causes of that can be different for different people. So we've all got sort of different ways of going about it, and I think that that's really important. So what you're saying about the biomarkers as well, I think that that's a really good future sort of direction in terms of knowing, okay, how do we treat this for this individual?
Yeah.
Another thing that's bothering me is that things have shifted in psychiatry so much to where psychiatrists are writing medication, or they're not writing medication anymore. They're writing medication, and then you're seeing somebody else for therapy. It's rare, at least we're in my area, that you're going to the same person for medication that you're going to for therapy. How does that make any sense?
Do you go to the same doctor?
You do not go to the same doctor. You see someone like a psychopharmacologist for your medication who's going to ask you questions like you were just talking about, Sam, or somebody said on the DSM, right? And they're going to meet with you for an hour for like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, right? Then you get farmed out to a doctor that is in your insurance, if you can find one that's in your insurance. Probably not. It's probably out of pocket. That will see you for therapy. And maybe they talk, maybe they don't. But either way, how is the person that's giving you medication not the person that's seeing you for what you're going through? How are they able to see your patterns? That's why my stuff was missed, because my patterns weren't seen. Finally, I met someone that did both, and she was like, I've met with you 3 times. I can see what's happening with you.
That's great that you found this. Yeah, it's the same.
Yes.
The psychiatrists just do the diagnosis, and then I just see him like every couple of months to see like how my treatment is going and if you need to make any adjustments. But we talk like for half an hour and that's it. But I really do like him because we did find a treatment that really works for me. I mean, like my moods are still going up and down, but it's not like that. It's like, right? I can manage it. I'm still functional. Still, although I do have my bad days or weeks, but I'm still functioning. But as you said, and I really like this guy because he's actually specialized in bipolar and ADHD. It was great for me. So I'm like, why can't you like see me every week to talk about these things? But yeah, they have a different kind of job, I guess, description.
Yeah, there's an argument now of whether psychologists should be able to or should be promoted to diagnose and to deal with medication. And a lot of doctors are very anti this, because all of the doctors are like, you're not allowed to do that. Like, you haven't gone through 7 years of medical school. You know, what gives you the right to be able to do that? And it's one of those things that's always going to fight. But I agree. I think that at least having the option of having psychologists being able to do this would be good, because then these people would be able to see them more frequently. They'd know more about their, you know, what they're dealing with, and then they'd be able to make more informed decisions. Like, you know, like what both of you are saying about the, you know, depression and anxiety. I mean, if you're seeing someone once every 2 like months or so, how are you going to be able to tell the difference between a host of mental conditions that people might be able to be suffering from? You can't tell that. So yeah, I think it's an important direction. At least psychiatrists need to spend a considerable amount of time with each individual.
Certainly, yeah, I agree. We have some questions, I think, Michael. Do you want to share with us, and we can try to address them?
I got to dig through and find them. I'm horrible with comments, so I'm self-aware.
I think somebody was asking how did the fact that we got diagnosed affect our life, and how we brought more.
That was a while ago. It was Brad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Brad. I just don't know where the comment went.
It's a long time ago.
I can't even find it.
It's like yesterday.
Oh, here it is. I found it. Took me a while.
Good question, by the way. Thank you, Brad.
Whoever wants to go
Annie,
first.
do you want to start?
Well, Michael will laugh at me because there's few people that know me better than he. So I would say that it really helps for me to understand and be aware of what cycle I'm in my life, including hormonally. I've never been good at that. Trying to keep track of it. No, let me change my languaging. I am keeping track of it now, but that's recent.
Let me write it down. I need to do that too.
I have like an app and stuff, okay. But like when you go for so long without knowing what is going on with you, I started before I totally understood it. And remember, I have that neuroscience background, so I learned a lot at work about it. So it helps and it doesn't help. It's a hindrance too, because then you start to psychoanalyze yourself too much. And then one other thing I wanted to note was that you get really, really extra sensitive to your moods. So you both noted that, you know, I'm not perfect. I'm still up and down, but I'm not up and down, right? It's like, it's okay to have moods. Like, it's okay. We're just humans. Like, we're supposed to have moods. We're not supposed to be like this all the time. That's like you're, you know, on some sort of benzodiazepine all the time. Like it's normal anyway. The point that I'm making to answer Brad is, and then there's knowledge around it and wisdom that I've gotten that has been really helpful to know that, you know, it's, for me, it gives me that safety that it's going to go away. Because one of my biggest fears in life is that when it comes, I'm going to see the darkness and I'm not going to be able to get out of the darkness again.
Yeah, I have this like mantra, this too shall pass, right?
So Anna, how's it helped you being aware or whatever? I don't remember the question anymore.
Yeah, it did help me a lot. It was first shocking. It was a big paradigm shift. It was a big perspective shift. It's like, because the path ahead changed. The way I saw, like the way I saw where I was at and where I wanted to go towards. Then looking back, right? Because when this kind of thing happens, this perspective shift changes the past, the way you see the past as well. So it was a big like, but it did bring me back, because I went through that process. It did bring back things that I was really passionate about, and I just brought them in my life, such as creativity. And I started like creating about bipolar because I wanted to share my experience. It was both therapeutical, and I wanted people that are going through the same to just feel like they relate to something. So that was a big thing for me, because when I was young, I just wanted to be an artist, and I didn't do anything about it for 20 something years. And now this diagnosis was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Whatever. Look what I'm going through right now. Like, what can happen to me, right? And I think Sam was saying something like this in his book, like, because people with this kind of mental challenges, they can have a lot of successes if they do manage their mood, because I think like dealing with that gives you certain strength and gives you more resilience towards doing other things. So it just made me more courageous. It made me more accepting of whatever was happening. So when I was down, I was like, I'm down, and that's that. Then when the high came, it feels quite good, but you get a bit scared because you know what happens after. So yeah, I think for me, what it brought is a lot of courage and a lot of like self-awareness of what I am about for real. And I was like, where am I going? Like, this is not the path I want to be on. And all the work I've been doing for the last years of self-development, I just use them for my future and to change, to course correct, because I was in corporate hospitality and I don't want to do that anymore. Sorry, it was a long answer.
No, it was great.
Yeah.
I guess for me, so for me, when I was first diagnosed, I feel like you said, Annie, I just sort of wanted to be completely stable. Like, you know, it's not the right way to go about it, but I wanted to have no fluctuations in mood, and that was sort of my goal. Almost wanted to be like a robot. And then I realized over time that I wasn't healthy and that wasn't good. So what instead I sort of started to adopt was, you know, it's essentially like a 3-stage process in terms of making sure that I was stable. You know, firstly, knowing what my triggers are, the types of things that cause me to be in episode. So for example, like for me, it's things that are generally surprising or big changes in my life. So positive or negative. So it could be like start of a new relationship, start of a new job, loss of a job, anything that's sort of a big change. That's normally the things which are going to influence that. And then knowing my early symptoms. So I know, you know, if I'm sleeping only a few hours a night, if I'm feeling really excitable and wanting to stay up extra, you know, if I'm talking more than usual, all of these types of things, or on towards the low side, you know, if I'm struggling to get out of bed, if I've lacking pleasure in things, etc. I know, you know, these things are starting. Now is my so that things don't get worse. And then finally creating action plans in terms of like, okay, so I see that I've had these triggers. I see I've had these early symptoms. Now what am I going to do? You know, am I going to ask whether I can be on, you know, PRN medication so that I can take a little bit extra medication to stabilize, or maybe use a particular meditation strategy or something. And, you know, I feel like for me, the diagnosis, what helped me most was being able to learn as much as I could about bipolar, so I knew the steps that I needed to take to manage it. So yeah, that's just my answer to that.
Okay, so mine's a little bit more complicated, because when I first got sober is when they diagnosed me with it, and that was almost 15 years ago. So, and I've been sober since, but because I've gone in and out of being spiritually connected or awake and not, it's created circumstances in my life of very tumultuous situations to where I've bounced all over the place. When I first got sober, it helped me identify the drug cocktail and alcohol cocktail that I used to mix to realize my moods, right? And because I'm ADHD, things that would normally make people up made me normal, right? Things that would normally make people down made me normal. So depending on how I would medicate myself, for me, it was the real pattern with me is when I start defaulting to escapisms, you know, and I've talked about it ad nauseum. I mean, I have so many different escapisms that I've run to at different times. I know when I'm in a down, I go to specific escapisms, and I know when I'm in an up, I go to different escapisms, right? So, I mean, for me, it's knowing that balance and knowing where I am at what moment, what's going on environmentally around me, because there's so much impact from my outside circumstances, whether I can control them or not. It has an enormous impact on And then over the past couple of years, started getting a thyroid issue where it starts shutting down and my body's killing it. So that's just adding on top of what I already had in the past. So it's making things more extreme, mostly downs, not really ups, but it's making the downs more extreme again for the first time in probably 30 years. But like my diagnosis is so strange because it wasn't until I got sober and until those chemicals came out, not that they even noticed with my mood, because I was still like in that fog, shall we say, for that first 3-4 months of being sober, but it was looking at the patterns, and that's how they diagnosed it. Right. When I got sober, I was very honest about everything I did and taking accountability for it up to that time in my life. Now that I've been sober for so long and I'm spiritually connected deeper than I've ever been, and I'm not walking away from it again, I'm now being super hyper acutely aware, which is my own creation because I don't think that's a real phrase. And I'm really paying attention to my own patterns. You know, for me, it's going to take my over analytical mind and make it a positive, because I'll overanalyze things to death, and I used to beat the shit out of myself with it. So today I'm choosing to turn it into a strength and making it positive for me. And by being that aware about myself, I notice those slight changes, and it could be anything, right? I mean, it could be changing the time of day I eat. It could be changing what I eat. It could be I'm having a bad day, so I'm eating shitty food because I want to make myself feel worse, right? I'm having a great day, I don't want to eat, right? Because I lose my appetite when I'm happy. So it's like, you know, I'm a different case than most people, and I'm not medicated either because the doctors decided a while ago that the medication was making me like a zombie. No matter what they put me on, it was great when I would have my spikes up or down, but because my cycles were much longer than most people, they were more like 90 to 120 day cycles. So because they were that long, in that big gap window, it would literally make me like a zombie. It would fog my mind out. I'd be so slow, I wouldn't be able to even keep up. And that's not how I'm used to living my life. I'm not really overly slow for processing. So it's, for me, that's how I went through, and it's really paying attention to the escapisms, right? And, you know, there's so many things that really are indicators for me, right? And whether it's hiding behind television shows, hiding behind book after book after book and getting obsessed with that because I don't want to live in the real world. I want to hide behind something, right? Or if something's getting stressful for me, I'll go to food, I'll go to porn, I'll go to gambling, I'll go to, you know, anything like that. You know, I mean, there was sex addiction for a while. There was strip club addiction for a while. There was anything that I could to chase that bounce back. For me, though, it was when I was trying to balance myself out. When I was manic, I always channeled it into being a workaholic because I wanted to be productive during those times. During those times, I wanted to be productive, so I would channel it into work. I mean, people used to make fun of me for having open at a time and them all from scratch at the same time. Because I was multitasking, my ADHD was managed completely, and it was able to focus on all the different things. But it was just me finding another out rather than being balanced, right? So for me, that's how it presents, right? And again, I mean, everybody presents differently.
No, thank you so much for all of your honesty there as well. I mean, it's beautiful when you hear people like really going in depth into like their own experience. Like, I guess, you know, I've gone definitely through those stages of like hypersexuality, you know, definitely gambling, you know, as like alcohol, drug use, things like that. Like, I feel as if like it's almost a way to regulate in a weird way, regulate yourself. Like, you know, I felt like during periods where I'd get more high towards the start, like I'd want to either drink or smoke up in order to sort of bring that down. And then sort of the opposite way when I wanted to sort of bring myself up, sort of wanting to get that, mainly to sort of be able to balance things, I guess. But yeah, no, it's bipolar is definitely a very difficult thing to go through. And yeah, it's quite cool to just chat with you guys and hear all of your own experiences.
Yeah, I feel the same, and I think we're also fortunate because we did find ways to be as balanced as we can be at this point, and that we are functional, highly functional, and we are showing up and we are here. But there are a lot of people that are not as fortunate, and because I'm in some groups and things, and I know they're losing their jobs because of this. They are failing relationships. They are breaking marriages. It is very much affecting people's lives, and I do believe that more and more should talk about this openly, so that those people that are really struggling know that there are people that go through the same things, and at the same time that there are people that they can reach out to, and just like seeing um, stories of success, and that there is hope, it can keep them going, because unfortunately, as we all know, um, suicide rate is very high with this condition. So I think we need to address that as well, because there are a lot of people out there struggling. And I actually want to say through this means, like, please reach out, because like you guys were saying, we develop our coping mechanisms, some good, some not so good, right? We go to the easy buttons. um, but one of my coping mechanism, wherever I go, either high or low, is to actually talk to some friends. I know it doesn't, you don't feel like doing it, right? Especially when you go low, you're like, I'm hiding, I'm gone under my duvet. But just like, I'm forcing myself to pick up my phone, and I know that I have a few friends that understand, and that they can ask me some questions, and just like being there and not feeling alone can help so much, and you can actually share. If you have somebody that you really trust, and you can just like at that moment when it's hard to talk to somebody, rather than waiting for, let's say you have a psychologist or a therapist appointment in 5 days, when you're really low in that moment, it doesn't really help seeing somebody in 5 days, right? So I would really encourage people, if they're going through tough times, if they don't want to speak publicly about it, but they need somebody to talk to, please reach out.
But I want to. But there's something to that also. Sorry, Sam. There's something to that also, right? And that is letting people in to the point that they're willing to understand, know you, and not judge you. Right?
Yeah.
You need people. We need people in our lives that we can be 100% transparent with, no matter what the experience is, and be there for us through thick and thin. And that is not easy to build, right? That takes time, energy, space, and two very accepting people, right? Because, in the ups and downs, there's a lot of torment on both sides. There's a lot of torture on both sides. And then there's a lot of self-blame, self-torture as well, right? And trying to interact through that and trying to work through that with somebody, it takes somebody who's very patient, very special, and means a lot, that's willing to sit through those things and understand our patterns, right? Because they have to put themselves aside a little bit and understand what our patterns are. Because taking the time, somebody willing to take the time to actually look past themselves, understand themselves, and then understand somebody else's patterns enough to actually be there for us, is something that's not easy to find in this world, right? I mean, it's a rare. And it's, for me, truthfully, I think I have maybe 3 people in my life like that. And that's only because of recently that I started allowing it, because I never thought I deserved it, right? So that's a whole other issue. I never thought I was worth it. I never thought that it was something that, I earned, or I was valued, or I valued myself enough, right? So it's really been the last 13 months of my life that has changed everything. March 5th of last year changed my life in perpetuity. Like, it just completely changed everything for me. And it's the willingness to be, bare, raw, real, naked in front of somebody and show it all, right? And just, bear all the flaws and understand that person's not going to judge you on your flaws, but love you for your flaws. Because that's what's truly important to allow somebody that close, because each one of us has a different pattern, has a different routine. And just because I have people in my life that I help balance them and they help balance me doesn't mean that if somebody new comes into my life, I don't have to put that time and energy in and understand their patterns and routines, right? And it's tough to do that. I mean, there's an enormous willingness on both sides, an enormous amount of acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I was just, thinking about what you're saying, and I was just thinking about romantic relationships as well, and that can be really tough because obviously in a romantic relationship, more than any, you really need that full acceptance during all of the phases. And I think that especially with bipolar, like you said, because it's an episodic illness and like you go through these completely different phases, and Michael as well, like I'm quite similar to you in that the periods are quite long, so so like if I was having like a long high and I had a girlfriend during that period, like they would be quite surprised after like a few months, I'm suddenly low for a few months, because it seems like a completely different person, and it caused a lot of issues in sort of interpersonal relationships and everything. So yeah, I think that this, I feel very lucky now, to be honest. I feel very lucky that I've got a girlfriend who's very supportive of me, and it's taken a long time to be able to find someone that would be like that. But yeah, it's beautiful when you do, and I think that this, we all deserve it. Like, having this issue isn't something that should make us feel unworthy. It's like living with this condition makes us, in my opinion, it makes us warriors, it makes us fighters, and staying good people and trying to do the good fight whilst doing this is difficult, and sometimes we make slip-ups, and that's okay, but yeah, we just need to meet people, I completely agree, who are going to accept us for who we are, and to see us as beautiful for who we are as well.
Well, I mean, the romantic side is completely different. Or like that's a whole nother level to me. And for me, it needs to be somebody that I trust with my life, my children's lives. It needs to be a best friend type person. It needs to be somebody that I can have so much trust in and so much faith in that I can go to that person with anything, right? And those people are hard to find, right? Like, you've got to find somebody on your level in every way, and that's not easy to do. Right? Because you don't want to intimidate somebody. You don't want somebody to intimidate you. You don't want to feel less than. You don't want to feel worthy. So for all those things to align, I mean, it's like when different, right? Because I'm so connected and spiritual on top of it, that's another layer of difference, because I've got to find somebody that accepts and understands that also, right? It's not only that I'm a single father of 3. It's not only the fact that I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, well, Mars. It's all these different things, right? Like, and then you add on the fact that I'm extremely spiritual and extremely connected. Then you add on the fact that, I have to get to that point of trust with somebody. And for me, there's a whole nother process there. And what I think I'm truly learning is that when somebody's worth it to you and somebody means that much to you, you put the time and energy in, and you take whatever time it's going to take, no matter what it is. And all you do is show up as yourself every day and always embrace the flaws. Because the flaws are the things that make us really insecure and really feared and really scared of. Because when somebody embraces your flaws, there's nothing left to be scared of. And that's the reality.
There's also self. So what's super important, and what we've talked about a million times, and what, there's so much that I've learned recently of embracing yourself. Like, having fear around this diagnosis does nothing for anybody. It doesn't help getting better. It doesn't help your relationships. It doesn't help your communication. So I prefer, or at least my fantasy version of me prefers, to lean into this and utilize this as part of my gift, even though it sucks and it's hard sometimes. But if I don't embrace myself and love myself for my flaws, not just because of the good things, but also really like the flaws about me, which is a long journey to get to, and I'm not there yet. But if I don't do that, I don't know if you can really let somebody else fully embrace you. You'll never get to that place where you allow that.
Yeah, definitely. Like there was a TED talk that I watched, a brave lady who was talking about the person who she needs to marry, and the punch, like the end of it, basically she said that the person that she needed to marry was herself, and it was a beautiful TED talk, and she basically said, I wish I could remember exactly what she said, but yet she was saying that, you know, she needs to accept herself in sickness and health. You know, basically did all of the vows. But yeah, no, and just basically accepting herself and loving herself for who she is, because she went through a very traumatic past, and because of that she fled to relationships, and she was always just trying to rely on other people, and was just like, you know, and then the relationships would sort of fail, and then she felt really really negatively about herself. But then making that decision was good for her, but it also helped her in terms of her other relationships in life as well, because focusing on herself and in bettering herself helped her. So I love that TED talk. And sorry, what you thought, what you guys were talking about just reminded me a lot of that.
I love it. It actually reminds me, sorry, I'm gonna chip in. I have I'm with this group of people, and one of them, he lives in Barcelona, and actually he proposed to himself, and he invited us all to his wedding to himself. So let's see if this actually will happen. I'm gonna go to like a night. It will be awesome. Like, imagine that. So that's awesome. I'm gonna be really honest. I haven't reached that level yet. I'm accepting. I am aware. I still have a few things that I'm still like about myself, right? And I know this is my journey, and I am working on it every day, and I have my tools and so on. But there's still some things there that, yeah, they're harder to digest.
So Annie, you want to answer DJ's question?
Sure.
Because it was directed
so it's a hard question. I believe that, I mean, if you look at my journey, if anybody followed my journey or has seen what I've done, I wasn't alone since I was 14 years old. I never was alone. I always had a partner of some sort. And then all of a sudden I didn't, the end of, 2019. And so I have to say that journey alone was the most painful I've ever been on, but it was the best thing that ever occurred in my life. But then I also think that if you're with someone, you have to both be open and willing to go on that journey. If the person is not open and willing with you, then it's never going to work. So if they only love you for the good stuff, and like you said, Sam, it was really hard in the relationship because I had a bunch of down months. I mean, you got to kind of embrace that when you love somebody. That's what love is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you found the good
That's
one.
It's what unconditional love is.
Yeah. It's hard though, because, we all have our programming, right? And a lot of us have not been allowed to sit with the bad emotions, right? And did not learn to accept them in others and in themselves. So it's a journey, right? It's a journey, as you said, for both people to go through that awareness and acceptance.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, you're going to disappear because I'm going to put this comment up and it's going to cover your whole head, just so you know.
Okay.
Like, it wipes Sam out.
Yeah. Oh, I relate to that, Tony. I'm there with you.
Yeah.
There are some things that yeah.
For me, I'm at a point where I truly do love all my flaws. I'm at a point where I truly accept, understand, and love my flaws. It doesn't mean that I don't stay aware of them and try to revert them or switch the triggers around them or really readdress them in a different action. But I really do love and accept myself for exactly who I am today, which is why I'm able to do it for somebody else. Right. And that has taken a shit ton of work. Like, that is an annoying amount of work. And that's literally me overachieving and doing work on myself because I was at a point in my life where I didn't have a choice anymore. To save my children, I had to do the work on myself because it was the only way I've been able to truly save them is by me saving myself. And as far as being in a relationship with someone, from my perspective, if you're in a relationship with someone and you're doing work and you start surpassing where they're at, if they don't start doing work to kind of keep up with the same, then the relationship's already over. And even if that person doesn't want to do the work on themselves and does work as a team together, you're still going to have a broken leg of the three-legged wheel. So to me, I don't see how it could work anyway unless work on themselves and work together. And I think as both parties keep stepping up at the same time, they're able to love and support each other at that level. And it doesn't mean that they have to be at the same place. It just means they have to have the same desire to, the same want to, the same acceptance level of it and understanding around it, right? And it's a tough process, right? To find people that are willing to look at themselves and do that darkest, deepest shit, right? Like, nobody really wants to do that. Nobody wants to think about the worst things they've ever done in their lives. But it's necessary to move forward. And truthfully, my connectedness has helped balance my type 2, bipolar 2, whatever you want to call it, right? That diagnosis. Because through the spirituality, through meditation, through being connected, that facet of my life has truly started to balance the other side out. It's taken away some of my waves because through my energy work, through meditation and stuff like that, I have ways to kind of balance myself that way instead, right? And find, even though I'm 1,200 miles away from everyone I know, and I haven't, had a person around for more than a few hours in 13 months, it's okay because I'm truly never alone because of my connectedness, right? So I still feel that on a daily basis. And it is as real as being physically in front of somebody.
Totally.
How long did it take you, out of interest, to get to that place? Because I'm definitely not there yet. I mean, I definitely feel as if I'm doing pretty well in terms of that. Like, I've made good leaps and bounds, but like I can imagine that must have taken a lot of work. I'm
a workaholic. So when COVID shut down every contract I was working on, I did the Brene Brown work first because Annie introduced me to it. And I wrote 6 5-subject notebooks to get rid of, right? So, like, I'm an overachiever when it comes to beating the shit out of myself. So if there's a way to beat the shit out of myself and work through something, I'm all for it, right? Like, I'm part masochist. So I'll go through the pain on a short time span. It's really been about 12 to 13 months of hardcore work on my emotional side, right? Because I did my 4-step, and that was, I think, somewhere between 4 and 5 5-subject notebooks also about my actions and owning them and doing that. I just have never done the emotional work. And I'm still doing the emotional work today. It's a never-ending process. I'm working with a specialized therapist. I'm, working with a spiritual guide and coach. Well, actually 3 or 4 of them. I'm always working on myself in every action and interaction I make in my life. It's all a part of who I am today and where I want to be. Like, there is no end result until I'm dead. And I'm okay with that idea because this journey is a magical journey that I want to experience to the best of my ability. And I want to embrace everything that I am while embracing others for everything they are. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So
sorry.
Go ahead, Sam.
No, I was just thinking because, you mentioned there as well about investment. Obviously, you got the time investment as well. And also, I guess, like, you're saying that you're doing, like, coaching and different things, that's obviously a financial investment as well. And I feel as if when it comes to mental health, often, like, people aren't, like, sometimes people don't feel like, oh, I want to prioritize other payments or other things that I need to have. And because of that, they're not able to give as much time or as much money. Money's not necessarily the most important thing, but either one or the other to be able to get the outcomes that they want. And it's like, I guess if there's one thing more than anything that I'd say to people, it's like, there's nothing a
More
bigger,
than-
more worthwhile investment in your life
than
than
yourself.
than yourself, and becoming well and being able to live your life. Because if you invest now, be it money or time or however way you're going to be doing it, you know, if you do that consistently, you're going to be able to live the life of your dreams. You're going to be able to actually start you know, start being the person you want to, well, you know, loving yourself and being the you that you are really, and being able to pursue your dreams and pursue your goals. So that's something that I feel very passionately about.
And real quick, and then I'm gonna let one of you, Anna or Annie, take over. But for me, it's all an energy exchange, right? Now, the way I look at things is, it's not about time, it's not about money, it's not about, you know, currency, it's not about any of those things. It's about energy. How much energy do I want to dedicate towards being the best person I can be for the rest of my life? Living in my soul center every day for the rest of my life, being that person that can help and lift up others every day of the rest of my life. Whether it's 42 years in 6 months, whether it's whatever it is, right? Like, you know, I know what I know because of my personal experiences, but it's different for everybody's journey. And, you know, what are you willing to put into being that person for you?
Go ahead, Annie. You wanted to say something earlier.
So there's thank you. There's a couple comments on the side that I wanted to, first of all, Michael, I love your definition of love. I understand that and relate to that. But there's a couple of comments. Jason made a comment about the next one, Mike. Flaw implies judgment. Do you really want to be judging yourself? So I just wanted to comment that is something that many people think, and it's, in my eyes, totally misconstrued, because self-awareness is not the same as judgment. So observing and being aware of something about yourself and knowing it's a flaw is completely different than beating the shit out of yourself for having that flaw. And then one other thing I wanted to say, on one of the comments, somebody said, my wife and I hate our flaws, but we do it in love. And I completely understand what you're saying, but as a fulfillment guide for what I do for a living, that I help people get to a place of fulfillment, I would want to talk to you, because my first thing I would say to you is, I believe from that paragraph that you're working against yourself. I think that what you're doing by hating that and saying that's a cancer is actually doing you a disservice.
Sam, we're gonna have to get you a stool, because you're like you're like one, Sam.
You have disappeared too much. It's only your head.
You can switch me with him if he doesn't want to be covered for a while. You can cover me.
No, that's fine.
So I can totally relate to that as well, because for a very long time I felt the same. Like, I wanted to fight against my flaws, right? Kind of like I saw them as this big thing. Where I'm at now is I accept them, right? But I accept them to the point that I accept them, but I don't love them, and I don't think I can ever do that. I do love myself. I mean, it to the point that I don't necessarily love myself unconditionally. I do love myself a great deal, but I have a lot of compassion for myself. And I think compassion is a really big step forward. And I have compassion to those flawed parts of myself as well. And since I started that, they don't show up as much, you know, because you're like, it's like with what we deem as the negative emotions, right? I just wrote a chapter for a book that is about anger. And anger is a big thing. Like, for me, with my bipolar and ADHD and so on, emotional regulation is not as easy to achieve, and I require a lot of work and a lot of self-awareness in that moment. But just like saying, right now I feel anger, and what can I do? So just like recognizing the emotion and just like accepting it for what it is, rather than say, oh, I can't be angry right now, why am I angry right now, I shouldn't be angry about that. You know what I mean? Like the narrative I used to have when I wasn't doing this work on myself, just feel like I'm angry. I feel angry, and I'm calling it out. And I have a choice to react or to respond. Sometimes I don't have the choice, because the reaction comes as a knee jerk. and it just happens. And forgiving yourself afterwards, that's the biggest challenge for me. And that's what I'm working on every day, because that's where that unconditional love is going to come, when I will be able to fully forgive myself for when the knee jerk reaction happens and I didn't have that extra split second to respond rather than react.
Well,
You're
and
describing
somebody talked.
allowing. Sorry.
Sorry?
I was just saying you're describing allowing.
Yeah, and somebody taught me to pause before reaction or acting.
Yeah.
So, and I agree with Annie, right? The self-awareness part is huge, and it takes a shit ton of work. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, you have to really learn yourself and things that you don't want to know about yourself all the time. Like, you really have to be willing to identify yourself without judgment of your patterns and behaviors, right? Because for me, I've had so many habits and behaviors that have been ingrained in me my whole life, that, you know, it's almost like I'm constantly fighting my subconscious. They want me to go back to the behaviors. They want me to go back to the habits. And only through being self-aware am I able to curtail that, so that I have the ability to be my best self daily, right? And be my soul-centered self. For me, it's taken me 41 and a half years to get here. Well, more than that, I guess. My birthday's next month. I guess 11 months. But anyway, it's taken me, you know, almost 42 years to get where I am today. And it's a combination of everything I've done over the last 42 years. It's not just the work I've done in the last year. It's not the work that I did when I got sober. It's also by becoming my own pharmacologist and learning how to, you know, balance myself through different drugs and alcohol, right? Like, you know, that was the beginning of my awareness, if I really look at it. Not in a positive way, but that was the beginning of my awareness. So
Coping mechanisms, right? We're coping in certain ways,
yeah.
whether it's in a good manner or in a not so healthy manner. Like when you're talking about this, like my thing is food. So it's like immediately, and like you're saying, Annie, because I think like our mood, my particular mood is very much relating to my cycle. And that's a very common thing with women. And like you can tell, like 2 weeks before it starts, right? And I just want all the chocolate and give me all the chocolate. And like to actually like be aware of what's going on. It's like this, it's not that I actually need chocolate. I just need to find a way to allow what's going on inside of me and to try to suit myself differently. Otherwise, like diabetes is my next big thing, and I don't want that.
One point about anger is like I was taught, I mean, maybe you just wrote a chapter in a book about it, Anna, but I was taught that, and it's my belief that there's typically always something underneath of anger, that anger is an emotion that's usually a blanket or covering another emotion. So if you are really enraged or angry about something, there's usually somebody like inside you that's hurting, ashamed, guilty, any of those things, and it's presenting as anger.
Most of the time it's a secondary emotion. That's like from my research, most of the time. But there are cases, like for instance, if you see somebody that is mistreated, anger is just anger, right?
Yeah.
I see somebody bullying you in front of me. It's nothing that has to do with me. I'm not scared. Right. I'm not under threat. But I see you and I get angry because that person is hurting you, right? So it can be anger as a primary emotion. It's just pure anger because something unfair is happening, right? It's a more like an intellectual awareness that something unfair is happening. So anger builds up inside of you, and it's actually really positive in that moment because it makes you take action against that behavior, not against the person necessarily, but against the behavior that triggers that emotion inside of you.
That's a good point. Thank you.
No worries. But yeah, a lot of the times it's fear, it's shame, it's your triggers, the biggest triggers, because that's the thing for me. I have like 2 triggers that I haven't sorted out yet. So like these ones I'm like working every day on. I know it might be all my life kind of work, right? maybe they're always going to be there, and it's just like having that awareness when it happens. And like you were saying, I don't know how you were calling it. I'm calling it like acceptance. You're calling it, Annie?
Me? Allowing.
Allowing. So this is like something I practice like most of the times when it happens. So
well, that's why it's not showing up as much for you, because you are allowing.
I'm allowing it to happen, and I know what it is. I recognize in my mind, like, this is what happened. And I reached that conclusion that is like completely untrue. Like, okay, let's do something about it. Whether it's breathing, whether it's me getting out of that situation that is triggering the response. Like, I go to the bathroom and I scream, like, not too loud, but it just helps me to get out that thing and just do something that can, or I go to the beach, and that's the best way.
I'm a door slammer. That's just me.
I love that.
I really feel a lot better after I slam the door. It just is. I've broken mirrors on doors.
Yeah.
I was like, this is
when I was a teenager, I can show you that I have like, I cut my finger because the door was made of purely glass. So I just like decided to slam the door in the glass. That was not a good.
Your excuse is that you were a teenager. My excuse was like, it was like last year that I did it. Like, it's like that I broke the whole entire mirror, door length mirror. But
mine is the phones, and that's a very expensive. Like, I just slapped the phone, and
that was me as well. That was the
slammer. You can call me that from now on. Dorothy understands too. Listen, at least I'm aware that that's my coping mechanism, and I want to. I was on the phone with Mike, or on a Zoom the other day with Mike, and I did something really stupid, and I threw a couple things across the room, and he just sat there, like, looking at me, like, okay, I know her. She's just gonna do this, and then she won't. And then, of course, afterwards, I was like,
it's like,
why do I do shit like that? But that's Annie.
It's right. And like admitting these things, like, we're human. It's not like we're gonna be zen all the time and like on a cloud and so on. No, things come and things make us have responses, and our body needs release. Our minds need some sort of release. And I go like, I just like scream. That's what helps me. And slamming my phone. But now it's like a very expensive one, so I'm not gonna slam it.
Don't regret it.
So, Sam, quick question for you, right? Are you empathic?
Yeah. So it depends on how you define that. Like, I feel like I do experience a lot of empathy, and I like to show that, especially to people who have suffered a lot in their lives. And this sort of main reason why I do the work that I do. If you say that, whether I think that I identify as an empath, I'm not entirely sure. I'd say that I've become actually less like that probably over time. But that's not a very positive thing. But I'm just being honest. But yeah, I do think I experience a lot of empathy.
So I'm curious, because I know I'm empathic, right? Like, I talk about it all the time. I know Annie is. We've talked about it ad nauseum. I know Anna Maria is. And the only reason I was asking is because I'm curious, because it seems like yours was almost a side effect of being misdiagnosed, right? Like, it put you into a state where you were able to feel others' emotions because you were at such a vulnerable, raw space that it became overwhelming, right? Me, I live in that space by the minute, and it's constantly overwhelming me. And that's something I've had to learn how to juggle also. And I was just curious because I wanted your perspective on it, because I feel like in some ways it might be easier to identify your personal triggers if you're not taking on other people's shit, right? Because, for years I walked around taking on the world's shit. Didn't matter who it was. My mother used to abuse me. Right. I mean, my mother used to abuse me, and I took on her shit, right? Like, it made me feel even worse about myself, because not only was I getting the abuse, but then I was also taking on her emotions around it, the hatred, the sorrow and feeling bad and all that crap, right? So I was just curious your opinion on that, because I think it's always good to have different perspectives. and understandings.
Definitely. And yeah, I think that I'd say that I'm quite lucky in that way, that I feel like I'm able to sort of, I guess, detach a little bit, you know, and yeah, I think that probably makes it a hell of a lot easier for me in terms of identifying what my triggers are, because perhaps I'm less affected by what's on the external. And I can imagine that if you're always sort of feeling for everyone else, you know, you can't really necessarily see or know when those triggers are coming in. And I guess for me, like if I'm thinking about it from like, you know, a clinical perspective of what would be best to say to someone like that, would be to focus, rather than think so much about know your triggers, would be know your early symptoms, so that you know when to sort of intervene and sort of almost skip that step. But yeah, I view myself as quite lucky in that way.
Yeah.
And I feel blessed this way.
Yeah.
No, Anna, go ahead.
It's because we had this conversation, Michael, about the empathy, and I think like at points it can become overwhelming to the point that it becomes sympathy, and that's like when it gets really, really overwhelming, because you're actually feeling it all. Like sometimes I feel like it feels like I feel the pain of the entire world, right? And I'm actually working towards putting this down. And Sam, what you're saying, like, oh, I don't know if it's a good thing that I feel right now that I'm not so empathetic. It's actually, I believe it's a good thing. And I actually read a study. I love to read studies. I don't know why. I just keep reading research. And there was a study on empathy versus compassion. And what they were saying, that empathy can actually work against you and against the people you are empathic towards, because it doesn't put you in a space where you can make like the kind of rational decision you should be making at that point to make an actual choice. You can be really reactive because of that empathy. And compassion instead is a much better thing to cultivate, right? Because you are unattached, right? But you still recognize that person, what that person is feeling. You kind of you feel it through empathy, but you don't rely only on the empathy. You detach yourself a little bit to keep your space, your energy, and you work with compassion towards that. That's kind of like my take on it, and that's what I'm working towards.
I've had many times in my life that because of empathy, I've stayed in bad situations or wrong situations, or because I was too worried about the other person on the other side, right? And that's where being a true empath kind of gets in the way a lot, right? Because it was always, I felt their feeling, I felt what pain would come, and it kept me in my marriage. And I mean, after 4 years, 5 years, you know, just because I knew what would happen, and I didn't want that upon anybody, even somebody like her. But you know, it's just when you make decisions because you feel what they're feeling, it really does screw up our own personal lives, right? And it makes us very torn, very confused, and for a long time it made me very duplicitous, right? Because I was ready to leave on one side and ready to walk out on the other side, and I never did it because I knew what was coming from it. And I was saying a lot and acting none because of it, right? Because of that emotional side and the emotions that I was carrying on her behalf. So it became this very screwed up paradigm of just a ton of misery and a lot of pain. So luckily, by the time I waited, I mean, she just hated me so much, she was happy. So it worked out really well.
Oh dear. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because like how do you feel, because you know you've managed to get to a place of stability, and you're also not taking medication, which is quite awesome and incredible. And like, how do you feel like, despite all of this, that you've managed to stabilize yourself?
I mean, a lot of it is my spirituality and connectedness. It is. Because when I was in that marriage for those years, even though I was sober, I went to so many different vices. I went to so many different escapisms that realistically at that point, I should have been on medication because I was very, very stuck in the downswing for probably 3 solid years. And I would have many mania episodes in between. It was very painful. It was very torturous. It was very crappy for everyone involved because it made me a person I wasn't, right? It made me react ways that I wasn't. It turned me into, at moments, verbally abusive when that's not who I am, right? Because I felt so beaten, kicked into the corner that I didn't know how to react. It's, you know, go ahead.
So there was a comment made by Jason. Was it not my turn? Was it Sam's turn? Oh, it was my turn.
He was asking.
Jason said, I use fear and intimidation, and I'm not proud of using it against people that don't deserve it. First of all, that's really commendable that you said that. So you're aware of that's what you do. But again, and we don't have to get into this now, but I would delve and get what I call an excavation of your core values, because what's happening is you're not aligned with who you are and your worth. And so therefore you're deflecting and taking it out on others using fear and intimidation because of how you feel about yourself. So something to take with you. I'm sorry that you have to deal with that, but it's not something that you always have to deal with.
And Jason, I don't know how much of my story you know, but you know, I've had 13 near-death experiences in my life where I've literally crossed to the other side and came back, which is one of the reasons I'm so spiritually connected. And there's all different kinds. I truly, truly appreciate your honesty. I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. And it took me in that marriage getting to a point where I wanted to be dead, where I woke up every day wishing I didn't wake up. I did not want to wake up anymore. I didn't want to live that existence. And it was because at that time I had a friend who just kept saying, as soon as you're ready, I'll buy you a ticket. I'll buy you a ticket. I'll buy you a ticket and bring you back to Florida. And it was the hardest decision I ever made, because that meant, you know, walking away from my children and leaving them in a situation where I knew what was going to happen to them, which unfortunately did happen. And it just, I tormented myself daily because I had to rebuild myself and I had to be completely broken first. And I needed to walk away from it and really break. And then what that enabled me to do is, as soon as I was able to, and I got hard, tangible evidence of the abuse against my children, it gave me the opportunity to go get them, right? And it gave me the strength to get in the car and drive for whatever it was, 18, 19 hours, not knowing how I was going to do it, because I had $3.40 in my pocket at the time when I got in the car and drove 1,100 miles. And now it's 13 months later and I'm still stuck here. So it's, you know, when you get to that place, sometimes walking away is the only option. And when you get to that place, it's what you need to do, right? And for your own sanity and that other person's, right? You need to be able to take that step for yourself and also respect to the other person, and go from there. That's for me, right? And that's my experience. That's not everybody's.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that was really, you know, beautiful to hear and really honest and raw. So I think that everyone really appreciated that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Does anybody else want to talk about your book real quick, Sam?
Yeah, I can talk a bit about my book. So my book's called Winning the War with Bipolar. It's a little bit about my own story with the disorder, but it's mostly sort of a structured book, like a sort of a self-help guide. And it's sort of structured in 4 sections. Like, first off, it's about what is bipolar, and just sort of going into depth from a lived experience perspective, really, of what it is, what it looks like, what it can look like for different people, like busting some myths and things like that. And then I talk a bit about after that is like therapy, how to make therapy work. So sort of a lot of problems that generally happen within therapy, why people often, you know, feel like they can't really get what they want out of it, etc. And then sort of more like specific like self-help like tips and things like that. And then I finish off talking about consistency, like how to keep it consistent over time. How do you stay stable over time? So yeah, that's sort of like a basic summary of the book. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed writing it. I've enjoyed sort of sharing it with people. It's mainly sort of actually had more interest in the research world than it has within people who are diagnosed with bipolar. But I always love it whenever I hear people reach out to me who've got the illness and they say, "Oh yeah, it's like you know, it's helped me and stuff like that." It causes me like a lot of pleasure when that happens.
We lost a bit at the end, I think.
It cut out a little bit at the end, but can you also put the link to your book in the comments too after the live's over?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, that was me with the ambulance.
I've been listening to the audiobook, and it's like it's good. I can relate to so much of it, and there's some good tips there that I have to. I'm going to try to implement some of them. So let's see how it goes. Like consistency is not my forte. Let's put it this way. But yeah, one step at a time.
I'm consistent in very few things, and for me to be consistent in Eston means so much to me that it's unbearable not to be.
Yeah.
So I think we can wrap it up. It's been an amazing conversation. I appreciate the three of you tremendously. It was very raw, very real, very honest for all of us. And I think whoever did, who did watch it today and who will watch it will get a lot out of this. So I appreciate you all tremendously and have an amazing day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us on. It's been really cool.
Awesome to talk to you guys.